After my class was dismissed, my teacher said, "Where do you think you're going? You're not allowed to go outside." "Why not? Everyone else gets to leave." I watched my classmates file past her into the hallway. Mrs. Paxton waited until the last student left before closing the door. She turned to me with that fake concerned face adults make when they think something's wrong with you. "Because of your sickness, you need to stay inside." "What sickness are you talking about? I don't have any sicknesses." I felt fine and hadn't missed a single day of school all year. She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. "Sweetie, your mom told us everything. I'm not allowed to discuss it with you. If you leave this classroom, there will be consequences." Before I could ask more questions, she grabbed her lunch bag and headed for the door. She said she'd be right back after heating up her food in the teacher's lounge. The door clicked shut behind her and I was alone in the empty classroom. Through the windows, I could hear all my friends playing outside. Carla's laugh echoed across the playground. Someone was bouncing a basketball on the blacktop. The swings creaked back and forth. Normal recess sounds that I should have been part of. I tried to focus on homework but couldn't concentrate. What sickness was Mrs. Paxton talking about? Mom hadn't mentioned anything at breakfast. I felt my forehead, but it wasn't hot. My throat didn't hurt. I wasn't coughing or sneezing. Nothing made sense. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The sounds outside got louder as more kids finished lunch and joined recess. I could see them through the window running around and having fun while I sat trapped at my desk like I was in detention. But I hadn't done anything wrong. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out of this room and find out what was going on. I walked to the door and turned the handle. It didn't budge. I tried again harder. The door was locked from the outside. Mrs. Paxton had actually locked me in. Panic started creeping up my chest. This wasn't normal. Teachers don't lock students in classrooms. I banged on the door, hoping someone in the hallway would hear me. The sound echoed in the empty room, but no one came. Through the little window in the door, I saw Mr. Almonte walking by with his coffee mug. I knocked frantically on the glass until he noticed me. He looked confused and came over to investigate. I could see him trying the door handle from the outside. "Please let me out." I pressed my face against the glass. He was reaching for his keys when Mrs. Paxton appeared out of nowhere. She grabbed his arm and pulled him aside. I couldn't hear what she whispered, but I saw his expression change. His eyes went wide, and he actually took a step back from the door. Mrs. Paxton whispered something else, and Mr. Almonte's face went pale. He looked at me through the window like I was dangerous, like I was some kind of monster instead of a normal fifth grader. Without a word, he backed away and hurried down the hall. Mrs. Paxton gave me a sad smile through the window before walking away too. She didn't even try to explain, just left me locked in like a prisoner. I slumped against the door, feeling more alone than ever. The classroom phone on Mrs. Paxton's desk caught my eye. If no one would tell me what was happening, maybe Mom would. I knew I wasn't supposed to use it, but this was an emergency. Being locked in a classroom had to count as an emergency. I dialed Mom's cell number from memory. She picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. Probably working from home like usual. She asked why the school was calling, and I explained everything. The locked door, the mysterious sickness, the way Mr. Almonte looked terrified of me. Mom went quiet for so long I thought the call dropped. Then I heard her sigh. Not an annoyed sigh, but a sad one. The kind she made when she had to tell me something bad, like when Grandpa got sick. I was hoping we'd have more time before this conversation. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, what's wrong with me? What sickness does everyone know about except me?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Oh, honey, I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. The doctor said it might not manifest until you were older, but I guess it's starting now." She was definitely crying. "What's starting?" "Mom, you're scaring me." My own eyes started watering. "Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything. You have something called latent aggressive response syndrome, and it runs in families." Mom's voice cracked on the last word. My legs went weak, and I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor with the phone pressed against my ear. Sometimes, without warning, you might hurt people without meaning to, or even remembering it afterward. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor while Mom's voice kept calling my name through the speaker. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't pick it back up at first. This had to be some kind of mistake because I'd never hurt anyone in my whole life. I finally grabbed the phone with both hands and brought it back to my ear. Mom was crying harder now, and her words came out between sobs. Grandpa had it too, and that's why we stopped visiting him at the nursing home. My stomach twisted into knots, remembering how Grandpa used to throw things and yell before they took him away. The doctors thought you wouldn't show any signs until you were much older, or maybe never at all, but I guess they were wrong. The classroom door opened, and Mrs. Paxton walked in carrying her lunch container. She saw me on the floor with the phone and rushed over, but stopped about 3 feet away like there was an invisible wall between us. "I'm so sorry, sweetie, but the school has protocols when parents report these conditions to protect everyone." She knelt down, but kept that same careful distance while watching me like I might explode at any second. Mom's voice came through the phone explaining that yesterday, I had an episode at home that I didn't remember at all. "You threw books and screamed at me for 20 minutes straight, and when it was over, you just went back to watching TV like nothing happened." My brain felt fuzzy trying to remember yesterday afternoon, but all I could picture was doing my math homework at the kitchen table and then watching cartoons. "I don't remember any of that happening." The words came out louder than I meant them to. Mom's voice got quieter and sadder. "That's part of the condition, honey, because people black out during episodes and don't remember what they did. My chest felt tight like someone was squeezing it, and I couldn't get enough air into my lungs. Mrs. Paxton gently reached for the phone, and I let her take it because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood up and walked to her desk while talking to Mom about next steps and safety protocols and medication schedules. I sat there on the cold floor trying so hard to remember yesterday, but my mind kept coming up blank except for normal boring stuff like homework and TV and eating dinner. The door opened again and 2 more people came in, but stayed near the entrance like Mrs. Paxton had. The school counselor, Ms. Stover, was holding a clipboard, and the nurse, Ms. Banks, had her medical bag, but neither of them came any closer. Mrs. Stover used that careful voice adults use when they think you might break into pieces. "How are you feeling right now? Are you experiencing any anger or frustration?" Ms. Banks stayed behind her writing something on her clipboard while watching me from across the room. "I'm just scared and confused because I don't understand what's happening." My voice came out shaky and weak. Ms. Banks wrote more notes and whispered something to Ms. Stover, who nodded and wrote on her own clipboard. They explained that I needed to stay isolated in this room until Mom could arrive with my medication, that apparently helps prevent episodes. What medication? I don't take any medicine. But even as I said it, I remembered the vitamins Mom gave me every morning with breakfast. Were those not really vitamins at all? Mrs. Paxton hung up the phone and came back over, but still kept that same distance. "Your mom is on her way and she's bringing everything we need to keep you safe." The way she said safe made it sound like I was the dangerous one, not them. Mrs. Stover pulled a chair from a desk and sat down near the door, still holding her clipboard. "We're going to stay here with you until your mom arrives, just as a precaution." Ms. Banks checked her watch and made another note. "Has she been taking her medication regularly?" Mrs. Paxton shook her head and explained that Mom had mentioned something about side effects and adjusting doses. The 3 adults exchanged worried looks that made my stomach hurt even worse. Through the window, I could still hear kids playing at recess, and Carla's laugh echoed across the playground. They were all out there having fun while I sat trapped in here finding out I was some kind of monster who hurt people without knowing it. Ms. Banks asked more questions about whether I felt hot or cold or dizzy or angry. I just felt scared and sick and wanted Mom to get here and explain everything better. The adults kept writing notes and whispering to each other while watching me like I was a wild animal that might attack at any moment. Every few minutes, one of them would ask how I was feeling or if I needed water or if anything hurt. Time moved weird and slow, like when you're waiting at the doctor's office, except way worse because I was the one who was sick with something I didn't even know existed until 5 minutes ago. The classroom door opened again about 20 minutes later, and Mom rushed in carrying her big purse and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messy and her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and she had this small orange bottle in her hand that she gave straight to Ms. Banks. Mom looked at me sitting on the floor and started toward me, but Mrs. Stover put her hand up and Mom stopped halfway across the room. Ms. Banks was reading the label on the bottle and her face got all confused and she shook it to hear the pills rattling inside. "These are just vitamins," she said, turning the bottle to show Ms. Stover. Mom's face went white and she started crying harder and admitted she'd been giving me vitamins instead of the real medicine for the past 3 months. The room got really quiet except for Mom's crying and I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Ms. Banks asked Mom where the actual medication was, and Mom said she threw it away because it was making me act like a zombie who couldn't think or play or be myself anymore. The door opened again and Mr. Wang walked in, wearing his usual suit and tie, but looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He asked Mom why she stopped giving me the prescribed medication when the doctor said it was necessary for everyone's safety. Mom told him the medicine made me sleep 14 hours a day, and when I was awake, I just sat there staring at nothing and couldn't even do simple math problems anymore. Mr. Wang pulled out his phone and said we needed to call my doctor immediately to understand what the real risks were without medication. Mom gave him a number, but warned that Dr. McNamara would say I was dangerous and needed to be locked up somewhere. While Mr. Wang stepped into the corner to make the call, Ms. Stover came closer to me but still stayed about 5 feet away and sat down on the floor too. She said lots of kids have conditions that need special help and management, and that didn't make them bad people. I could tell she was trying to be nice, but her hands were shaking a little, and she kept looking at the door like she wanted to leave. Mr. Wang put his phone on speaker, and this woman's voice filled the room, introducing herself as Dr. Brighton McNamara from the Children's Psychiatric Unit. She started explaining that without my medication, episodes could happen every single day, and get worse each time until someone got seriously hurt. The doctor said I needed to restart the medicine right away, and be watched in a hospital for at least 72 hours to make sure I didn't have a bad reaction. Mom started arguing with her about how the medicine turned me into a different person, who couldn't laugh or play, or even recognize my own friends. Dr. McNamara's voice got harder, and she said being a zombie was better than hurting someone or worse, and that made my stomach feel like it was full of rocks. Mr. Wang looked at me and then back at his phone and said I couldn't return to regular classes until the medication was working and I was stable. He said they were moving me to the special education room starting tomorrow, where there would be more adults watching and fewer kids who could get hurt if something happened. That's when I started crying for real, because special ed meant everyone would know something was wrong with me, and all my friends would find out I was dangerous. Carla would probably never talk to me again, and nobody would want to sit with me at lunch or pick me for their team in gym class anymore. Ms. Stover reached into her pocket and pulled out her own phone, saying she knew someone who might be able to help us understand better. She said Mom's colleague Raul Sosa had a son with the same condition, and maybe he could explain what we should expect and how to handle everything. Mom nodded and wiped her face with a tissue from her purse while Ms. Stover dialed the number. Through the window, I could see kids starting to come back inside from recess, and I wondered if they knew their classmate was locked in here like some kind of monster. Ms. Banks was writing more stuff on her clipboard, and Mr. Wang was asking Dr. McNamara about different medication options and doses. The doctor kept saying the same thing over and over about how I was a danger to myself and others without proper treatment. Mom walked closer to me but still stayed back when Ms. Stover held up her hand again like I might attack at any second. I wanted to tell them I felt completely normal and wasn't angry or upset except about being locked in here, but nobody was really listening to me anyway. Mrs. Stover got through to Mr. Sosa and explained the situation while everyone else kept talking about medicines and hospitals and special rooms. I pulled my knees up to my chest and put my head down because everything was happening so fast and nothing made sense anymore. The adults kept using big medical words I didn't understand and making plans about my life without even asking me what I thought or felt. Mrs. Banks said something about calling an ambulance if I showed any signs of aggression, and that made me want to scream. But I knew that would just make everything worse. Mom was arguing with Dr. McNamara again about trying a lower dose first, but the doctor said that wasn't safe, and we needed to start with the full amount. Mr. Wang hung up the phone and told Mom we needed to make a decision right now about whether to take me to the hospital voluntarily or wait for child services to get involved. Mom looked at me with the saddest face I'd ever seen and said we'd go to the hospital, but she wanted to pack some of my things first. Ms. Stover said Mr. Sosa was on his way to the school and would meet us at the hospital to help explain everything better since he'd been through this with his own kid. 20 minutes later, the classroom door opened and a tall man with gray hair walked in carrying a folder and a phone. He looked right at me and smiled. Not the fake smile adults use when they're scared, but a real one like when Dad used to smile at me before the divorce. He walked over and sat down in the tiny chair next to my desk, which made his knees stick up almost to his chest, and he didn't seem to care how silly he looked. He told me his name was Raoul, and his son had the same thing I did, and was doing great in high school now playing soccer and getting good grades. He pulled out his phone and showed me a video of a kid in a blue uniform kicking a ball into a goal while other kids cheered and high-fived him. The kid looked happy and normal and not like someone dangerous at all. He swiped to another video of the same kid laughing with friends at what looked like a birthday party with cake and presents everywhere. Mr. Sosa explained that the medicine did make his son feel weird at first, but the doctors figured out the right amount, and now he barely noticed taking it. He said it took about 3 weeks to get the dose right, and during that time his son felt tired and confused, but it got better. Mom had been quiet in the corner, but suddenly she started talking fast about how she'd been pretending everything was fine, even though she knew it wasn't. She rolled up her sleeves and showed everyone purple and yellow marks on both arms that I'd never seen before. She said I'd grabbed her last week when I got mad about not being allowed to go to Carla's sleepover, and I didn't remember any of it. My stomach felt like it dropped through the floor, and I stared at those bruises trying to remember grabbing her, but there was nothing in my brain about it at all. The room started spinning, and I had to put my head down on the desk because I thought I was going to throw up right there. Miss Banks stood up and said we needed to go to the hospital immediately to restart the medication under supervision, because that was the protocol when someone had been off their meds and showing escalation. She said they had special rooms for kids like me where doctors could watch and make sure the medicine was working right. Mom started putting my books and pencils in my backpack while Mrs. Paxton went to the door and looked out at the hallway. She said she'd tell my classmates I went home sick, which wasn't really a lie since I did feel sick knowing I hurt Mom and didn't remember. Through the window, I could see all the kids from my class playing tag on the playground, and Carla was it, chasing everyone around laughing. They had no idea their friend sitting inside was someone who could hurt people without even knowing it. Mr. Wang made some phone calls while Miss Stover helped Mom gather my things from my cubby in the back of the room. Everyone was moving around me like I was a bomb that might go off, and I just sat there feeling smaller and smaller. The drive to the hospital took forever with Mom crying quietly in the front seat while I stared out the window at normal people doing normal things. At the hospital, they took us straight to a special part on the 3rd floor with locked doors and cameras everywhere. The room they put me in had soft blue walls with padding and no sharp corners on anything. The bed was bolted to the floor and the window had thick plastic over it instead of glass. A nurse in purple scrubs sat in a chair right outside my door where she could see everything I did through a big window. They gave me the medicine in a little paper cup and watched me swallow it and then checked my mouth to make sure I really took it. Within an hour, everything felt different, like I was underwater trying to move through thick syrup. Mom sat in the corner chair crying and filling out papers while doctors kept coming in asking me questions about how I felt and if I remembered things. They asked the same questions over and over like they were trying to catch me lying, but I wasn't lying. I just couldn't think straight with the medicine making my brain feel like cotton. Dr. McNamara showed up that night and looked at my chart and said the dose was too high and adjusted it down a little bit. She promised it wouldn't always feel this bad, and they just needed to find the right balance for my body. She said some kids needed more and some needed less, and it was like solving a puzzle to get it right. That first night I barely slept because the nurse kept shining a flashlight in my room every hour to check on me, and the medicine gave me weird dreams when I did fall asleep. The next morning felt a little better, but still foggy, and they brought me breakfast on a plastic tray with no fork or knife, just a spoon. Around lunchtime on the 2nd day, something happened that I don't remember at all, but they showed me the video later. In the video, I was sitting on my bed and then suddenly stood up and threw my juice cup at the wall and started yelling at the nurse about wanting to go home. My face looked angry and mean in a way I'd never seen before, and then just as suddenly as it started, I sat back down like nothing happened. The nurse in the video stayed calm and wrote something on her clipboard while someone came to clean up the juice. When they showed me the video, my hands started shaking, because that angry person didn't look like me or sound like me, but it was definitely my body doing those things. The nurse asked if I wanted to watch it again, but I shook my head so hard it made me dizzy, and she put the tablet away in her pocket. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I kept looking at them like they belonged to someone else because those hands in the video threw things and made fists. The nurse wrote something on her clipboard and left to get the doctor, while I sat on the bed with my knees pulled up to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible. Through the door window, I could see Mom talking to someone in the hallway, and she kept wiping her eyes with a tissue. The next morning, Mr. Sosa came back, but this time he brought someone else with him, and it was a teenager wearing a soccer jersey and jeans. The teenager looked normal like any high school kid you'd see at the mall or wherever, and Mr. Sosa said this was his son who had the same thing as me. The son sat in the chair across from my bed and told me he was diagnosed when he was 8, after he pushed a kid off the playground equipment without remembering it. He said the first year was hard with all the medicine changes and people being scared of him, but now he played varsity soccer and had a girlfriend, and most people at the school didn't even know about his condition. He showed me a pill container on his keychain that looked like a regular decoration, and said he took his medicine at lunch every day, and nobody noticed or cared. Mr. Sosa's son said the foggy feeling gets better once they find the right dose, and pretty soon I wouldn't even notice it anymore, just like wearing glasses makes everything clear after a while. While they visited, Mom left for a couple hours, and when she came back she looked different somehow, like less tight in her shoulders. She said she went to a support group for parents of kids with our condition, and met other moms and dads going through the same thing. She said one mom had been dealing with this for 10 years, and her daughter was in college now studying to be a teacher. Mom sat on my bed and held my hand, and said she was sorry for lying about the medicine, and for not preparing me better, but she was learning how to help me the right way now. On the third day I woke up and my head felt clearer, like someone had turned down the volume on the fog from 10 to maybe a 6. The nurse noticed I was more alert and called Dr. McNamara, who came in and checked my eyes with a little light, and asked me to follow her finger back and forth. She said my body was adjusting well and we were finding the sweet spot where the medicine controlled the episodes but didn't make me too drowsy. I hadn't had any episodes for 2 whole days, which she said was a good sign the medicine was working. The hospital social worker came that afternoon with a big binder and sat with Mom and me to make something called a safety plan. She had charts showing warning signs to watch for, like getting a headache behind my eyes, or feeling hot and tingly in my hands, or hearing sounds get muffled like being underwater. She gave us a list of steps to follow if I felt an episode coming, like finding a safe space away from people and doing breathing exercises and calling Mom right away. The social worker also had papers about my rights at the school and accommodations they had to provide by law, which made Mom sit up straighter and take lots of notes. Mr. Wang showed up the next day wearing a tie instead of his usual polo shirt, which meant this was official school business. He said they'd been preparing for my return with special training for staff and setting up a quiet room where I could go if I needed space. He said Ms. Stover would check on me throughout the day and help me recognize warning signs since she had special training in behavioral conditions. He brought my homework from Mrs. Paxton, which seemed weird to think about math problems when my whole life was different now. But Mom said keeping normal routines was important. That evening, Mom and I practiced identifying my specific warning signs, and she had me close my eyes and describe what I felt in my body right before the episode I didn't remember. I told her about a weird headache that started behind my left eye and spread across my forehead, and how my fingers felt buzzy like when your foot falls asleep. She wrote everything down in a notebook and said we'd track patterns to figure out my triggers, which might be stress or lack of sleep, or even certain foods. The doctor said I was stable enough to go home after 5 days, and Mom packed up my stuff while the nurse removed the IV from my arm, which left a purple bruise. The ride home felt strange because everything looked the same outside, but I knew nothing would actually be the same anymore. When we got to the house, I noticed things were different. Like the glass vase that used to be on the coffee table was gone, and the sharp corners of the furniture had foam bumpers stuck on them. Mom had moved all the kitchen knives somewhere I couldn't see them, and replaced my regular drinking glasses with plastic ones. My room looked mostly the same except for a camera mounted in the corner near the ceiling, and Mom showed me the baby monitor receiver she kept in her room. She said it was just until we knew the medicine was working completely, and I could turn it off when I changed clothes, but she needed to know I was safe at night. That first night in my own bed, I laid awake scared that I might sleepwalk and hurt Mom without knowing it, but she said the monitor would alert her if I got up. The weekend came and Mom said we were going somewhere special, which turned out to be the care facility where Grandpa lived. I hadn't seen him in over a year, and Mom always said he was too sick for visitors, but now I understood what kind of sick she meant. Grandpa was in a wheelchair in the common room, and his wrists had soft straps holding them to the armrests, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. He told me I was brave for starting medicine so young, and that treatments were much better now than when he was diagnosed 40 years ago. For the first time, I understood why he lived there with nurses watching him, and why sometimes they had to use the straps to keep him from hurting himself or others during episodes. Grandpa wheeled himself closer to me, and the nurse stepped back but stayed nearby watching us carefully. His hands shook a little when he reached out to pat my knee, and I could see old scars on his arms that made my stomach hurt because I knew how they got there. He told me about when he was my age and first started having episodes and how back then nobody understood what was happening, so they just called him a bad kid and sent him to special schools where they locked kids up. He said the medicine they had then made him so tired he could barely stay awake in class, but now the drugs were way better, and I was lucky to be starting treatment young. The nurse brought us juice boxes and cookies, and Grandpa showed me exercises he learned to calm himself down when he felt an episode coming, like pressing his palms together really hard and counting backwards from 20. He made me practice the exercises right there in the common room, while other residents watched TV and played cards like this was all totally normal. Mom took notes on everything Grandpa said and asked him questions about his triggers and warning signs, and he said stress was the biggest one for him, especially when people didn't understand his condition. Before we left, Grandpa grabbed my hand with both of his and said I was braver than he ever was at my age, and that things would get better once everyone understood what was happening. The drive home was quiet, and I stared out the window thinking about going back to the school on Monday, and how everyone would look at me different now that they knew. Sunday night I barely slept, even though the medicine usually knocked me out, because I kept imagining walking into class and seeing all those faces staring at me like I was some kind of monster. Mom made my favorite pancakes Monday morning, but I could only eat a few bites before my stomach started hurting from nerves. She drove me to the school instead of letting me take the bus, and I saw parents in the parking lot turn to stare at our car when we pulled up. The front doors looked huge and scary, and I wanted to ask Mom to take me home, but I knew I had to face this eventually. Ms. Stover was waiting right inside the entrance wearing a bright yellow sweater, and she smiled at me, but I could tell she was nervous too by the way she kept adjusting her glasses. She walked beside me down the hallway, and other kids pressed against the walls to get out of our way, even though there was plenty of room to pass. Some whispered to each other and pointed, and I heard someone's mom say something about keeping her kids safe, but Ms. Stover just kept walking and talking about how nice the weather was. We got to Mrs. Paxton's room 5 minutes after the bell rang, and I could hear everyone inside already doing morning work. Mrs. Stover knocked, and Mrs. Paxton opened the door with this big fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, and she said welcome back in this super careful voice like I might explode if she talked too loud. Every single kid in the room turned to stare at me, and the whispering started immediately, even though Mrs. Paxton clapped her hands for quiet. My desk wasn't where it used to be in the middle row, but had been moved right next to the door, and there was extra space around it like a bubble where no other desks were close. I sat down and pulled out my pencil case and tried to act normal, but I could feel everyone watching every move I made. The girl who used to sit next to me had been moved 3 desks away, and when I looked at her, she quickly turned around. Carla was in the back row and wouldn't look at me at all, just kept her head down working on her math sheet like it was the most interesting thing ever. Mrs. Paxton started teaching about fractions but kept glancing at me every few seconds like she was checking if I was okay. When the lunch bell rang, everyone grabbed their lunch boxes and rushed out, but I stayed in my seat because Ms. Stover had told me she'd come get me. She showed up right on time and walked me to her office, which had a small table set up with my lunch already waiting. She said this was just temporary while everyone adjusted, but we both knew it was really because parents were scared I might hurt their kids in the cafeteria. I ate my sandwich while she did paperwork, and through her window I could see the playground where everyone was playing kickball and tag without me. After lunch was recess, and Ms. Stover said I could read in the library or help her organize papers, but I asked if I could just watch from the window. She let me stand by the big windows in the main hallway that looked out at the playground, and I watched my friends run around and laugh like I used to do with them just a week ago. That's when I saw a mom I recognized talking to Mr. Wang near the playground fence, and she kept pointing up at the window where I was standing. Mr. Wang was shaking his head and holding up his hands like he was trying to calm her down, but she looked really mad and kept pointing at me. The mom grabbed his arm, and I could see her mouth moving fast, even though I couldn't hear the words through the glass. Mr. Wang gently pulled his arm away and took out his phone to show her something, but she pushed the phone away and stomped toward the building. A few minutes later, I heard shouting from the main office down the hall, and the mom's voice saying I was dangerous and shouldn't be allowed near normal kids. Mr. Wang's voice was calmer but firm, saying something about federal laws and my right to education with proper accommodations. The mom yelled that her tax dollars shouldn't go toward keeping violent kids in regular schools, and that's when Ms. Stover closed her office door so I couldn't hear anymore. That night, Mom got a call from another parent who said a group of them were starting a petition to have me transferred to a special school for kids with behavioral problems. Mom started crying and said she'd failed to protect me, and maybe we should just move to a different town where nobody knew about my condition. But the next day, Mr. Sosa called and said he was organizing a meeting with other parents whose kids had similar conditions, and they were going to the school board meeting to share their stories. He said his son had graduated high school with honors, even with his condition, and 2 other families had success stories too. The school sent home a letter that week saying they were doing special education sessions about neurological conditions for all students and parents. The letter didn't mention my name, but everyone knew it was because of me since I was the only kid who'd been locked in a classroom and taken away in front of everyone. The next day at lunch, I was eating in Ms. Stover's office again when I heard voices outside her door and recognized Jake from my math class asking if he could talk to me. Mrs. Stover opened the door, and Jake stood there holding his lunch tray looking nervous but curious, and asked if my medicine was like his brother's ADHD pills. I nodded, and he sat down across from me and started asking questions about whether I really couldn't remember the bad times. And I told him it was like waking up from a dream you can't quite catch. He said that was weird but kind of cool in a scary way, and then asked if I wanted to trade my chips for his cookies, which felt like the most normal thing that had happened in weeks. The next few days, more kids started saying hi in the hallway, and Maya asked if I was coming back to art class soon, and Tyler wanted to know if the medicine made me feel funny. I answered their questions the best I could, and slowly the staring stopped, and I wasn't the scary girl anymore, just the girl with the condition that needed medicine. 2 weeks after the education sessions, Carla walked up to me during indoor recess while I was reading in Mrs. Stover's office, and she stood in the doorway for a long time before finally saying her mom had explained everything about my sickness. She said she was still scared because she'd never known anyone who could hurt people without meaning to, but she missed being my friend and wanted to know if we could try again. I started crying and nodded, and she came over and sat next to me but not too close, and we just sat there for a while not talking, but it felt better than all the talking in the world. She asked what signs to look for if I was getting bad, and I told her about the headache and tingling hands and how my voice gets flat right before it happens. We made a plan where she'd tap her pencil 3 times on her desk if she noticed me acting different, and I'd go to Ms. Stover right away. Having someone who knew everything and still wanted to be around me made the heavy feeling in my chest lighter, and I could breathe better for the first time since the hospital. Every day, Carla sat a little closer, until by the end of the week she was right next to me again, and we were sharing her colored pencils during free time. A month after I came back, Mr. Wang called Mom and me into his office and said I'd been doing so well that they wanted to try supervised recess with a small group. I could pick 3 friends to play with while Ms. Stover watched from the bench, and if everything went okay, we'd add more kids each week. I picked Carla and Jake and Maya because they'd been the nicest, and that first recess outside felt like Christmas morning. We played 4 square on the blacktop, and Mrs. Stover sat on the bench with her coffee watching but not interfering, and for 20 minutes I felt like a regular kid again. Jake kept making jokes about how I threw the ball like a robot because of my medicine, and Maya said at least I didn't throw like Jake's little sister, and we all laughed and it was perfect. Every week they added 2 more kids to my recess group, and by the second month almost half the class was playing with me, though some parents still complained to Mr. Wang about safety. Mom started taking me to see Dr. McNamara twice a week for family therapy, where we sat in her office with the fish tank and talked about how guilty Mom felt for lying about my medicine. Dr. McNamara helped us make charts about managing my condition together and taught Mom how to spot my warning signs better than even I could. We practiced what to do if I felt an episode coming and made emergency plans for different situations like being at the store or at someone's house. Mom cried a lot during those sessions, but Dr. McNamara said that was normal and part of healing from the trauma of finding out your kid has something scary. 3 months after the whole thing started, I'd only had 2 small episodes, and both times I felt them coming and got to a safe space before anything bad happened. My medicine dose was finally right, and the foggy feeling was mostly gone, though I still felt a little slow in the mornings before it kicked in. The shaking hand side effect had stopped, and I could write normally again, which made homework much easier. Mr. Wang sent a letter home saying the integration program had been successful, and they were using what they learned from me to help other kids with hidden conditions. 3 other students came forward about their own conditions after seeing how the school handled mine, and they got support plans too. At the end of year celebration in June, they called my name for a special award, and I walked up to the stage thinking I was in trouble. But Mr. Wang handed me a certificate for courage and resilience. Even the parents who'd been scared of me clapped, and Mrs. Paxton was crying, and Mom was recording everything on her phone. Life wasn't the same as before and never would be, but it was good in a different way, and I had friends who knew the real me and still cared, and that was enough. Thanks for hanging out and questioning things right alongside me today. Really enjoyed digging into all those curious little details together. Until we meet again, take care, subscribe for more content like this.